misprocured contracts, centrally driven contracts, are actually an invitation for fraud.
When billions of pounds of your money completely vanish in the thin air, mainstream media tells you this is just government incompetence. They want you to think politicians are just stupid, but they are lying to you. Because this is not a structural stupidity, it's institutional theft. When you look at the raw data coming out of the Public Accounts Committee, you realize the state is acting less like a government and more like an international cartel. Let Rupert Lowe explain what's going on in this bloody country. Let's play the tape, guys.
I think a lot of people can be excused for thinking there is incompetence coming from the state, but you've been in the machine now for about 18 months, and you've started to uncover some things when people will give you the data. They don't always answer your questions, but I'm starting to question whether this is incompetence, or is the state now actively working against the British people in the country?
Well, first of all, I should say it's not just me. I've got a team of incredibly dedicated and very able young people who are helping me. I think, my 68 years of knowledge and experience in various businesses allows us to home in on where we need to be, but they play a big part in it too, because you can't simply do this on your own. But in answer to your question, do I think the British state has become the enemy of the electorate? I do. I think they have.
Simply asked. He just confirmed that we all suspected. The state stopped serving citizens decades ago and became their active adversary. They treat your hard-earned wages like a bottomless ATM for their mates. Let's play another one.
And I think when I look at, and I'm on, as you know, on the Public Accounts Committee, which is uncovering all sorts of incompetence and waste and lack of respect for taxpayers' money, as I said yesterday to one of the Treasury officials, it's very easy to spend other people's money. It's easier to spend other people's money than it is to spend your own money.
Yeah.
And literally, Peter, that's happening everywhere. So I think we've got, obviously now, it's not just Labour, but Labour, as you know, have an incompetent front bench. Most of them are members of the Fabian Society. You probably saw...
Fabian Society. That's very nicely put.
Sadiq Khan was addressing the Fabian Society. And that is ideologically driven. That is basically against everything that you and I would stand for. That is pro-statism and anti the individual, which they want a dependency culture. They don't want a thriving, independent, self-reliant state. So I think Labour are driven by ideology, but the question one has to ask oneself is, how did the Tories let this happen over 14 years? Where they had two overall majorities. Obviously, they had a Lib Dem alliance, but they had one overall majority when Cameron had one, and then a huge overall majority when Boris had one. And actually, a lot of the problems do, I'm afraid, emanate from Tory legislation. So I think what's happening is the state's got bigger and bigger. It's got less and less respect for the electorate, and you saw that with the 2016 result. They didn't want to honour the decision of the British people, and that was a decision. If you strip out the main cities, you had a huge majority for Brexit, not for economic reasons. I think people did it because they wanted their country back, but the bureaucrats didn't agree with that decision, so they frustrated it, which is largely why I'm in Parliament now. So you've got the head of the beast, I think, has no respect, and then you've got this extraordinary situation where you've got HMRC, who yesterday were described as cutting edge by somebody on the Public Accounts Committee, which I found extraordinary. So what they're doing is they are basically rolling through Britain with their 22,000 pages or whatever it is of statute, and collecting taxes that are then being spewed up against the wall by a state that's got too big, is hugely inefficient, and has no respect for taxpayers' money. And I see this literally every week, twice a week, at the Public Accounts Committee.
I mean, he's right, isn't he? Small businesses are getting crushed by their basic tax code of 22,000 pages. 22,000 pages. Meanwhile, the Uni Party takes that exact money and dumps it down the drain. It's total financial tyranny. Let's watch another one.
And you've probably seen today we've uncovered this huge amount of waste on this Bibby Stockholm contract, which is huge. And Lloyd Hatton, it's his constituency. He's one of the members of the Public Accounts Committee. So I've actually sent him what we've discovered. He may or may not have known that, but this was a contract signed, overseen by Jenrick and Braverman. So I find, what do we find? We find waste everywhere.
How much,
Peter?
waste?
I mean, billions and billions and billions.
Billions and billions and billions. Look at the Migrant Barge contract signed by the Tories. Billions of pounds vanished into an open pit of statute failure. No one gets fired, no one goes to jail, and you pay the bill. And if my accountant will do something wrong, I'm gonna pay the fine. Me. Not somebody. Me. Let's watch another one.
And for instance, the DWP has had its accounts qualified for 37 consecutive years. So I said, well, if I was a director of a company that had qualified accounts for 37 consecutive years, I would have suffered some form of penalty. But state bodies don't have the same, if you like, application of company law and laws that pertain to a director of a company as they do in the private sector. So you've got this schism between the state and the private sector.
For example, the Department for Work and Pensions has failed its dependent financial audits for 37 years in a row. If me, a business owner, did that for one single year, the police would break my door. How come the state is completely outside the law? Explain me this. Drop your comment below. Let's watch another one.
Peter, when you look at the contracts that we've uncovered, and we're
Yes.
just starting to get our minds around them, and you look at what happened with COVID. You look at all of the misdirected contracts and all of the printed money that went missing, and you look at you've got to ask yourself, I know the state's gone wrong, but the question I ask myself is the British state in the hands of organised crime? I just don't know, because what I do know is that misprocured contracts, centrally driven contracts, are actually an invitation for fraud. And you've seen it in Italy, where you've got immense wealth in Milan and northern Italy, which is probably the richest part of Europe. If you take the Po Valley and you take that part of Europe, and then you have vast transfers of wealth down to southern Italy. What happens? Sticky fingers.
Of course.
What happens with HS2 contracts? Sticky fingers. What happens with any other form of unmonitored or unvetted procurement contracts? Sticky fingers.
Sticky fingers, I love it. Right, so from COVID, emergency deals, to HS2 rail disaster, every major state project is just an invite for corporate fraud. It mimics blatant Eastern European style corruption. Believe me, I've seen that firsthand. Just gift wrapped in the British administrative language. The ruling class is robbing the nation blind, and everybody's happy about it. Incompetence is the perfect shield for criminal behavior. As long as you believe the politicians are dumb, you won't demand asset seizures and prison sentences for the people asset stripping this country. They tax you and small businesses to death just to fund their personal playground. If you do think that British state completely controlled by organized corporate cartel, let me know down below in the comments. I'll see you in the next one, guys. They treat your brand, they treat your hard-earned wages like a uniparty. It just grabs all that money and let it... Look, the Migrant Barge contract signed by the Tories, billions of pounds vanished into an open air. For example, how come the state is invincible? How come the state is completely outside the law?